The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Be a movie. Yeah, we're gonna be a movie.
Starring everybody
And me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of fuss that ends for us real happily. Be a movie. We can watch it all develop. Starring everybody.
And me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear.
Come on, join in. We're gonna start right here.
And we are going to start right here. Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast triple feature. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And joining me tonight, she can make you a man in just 7 days. Ladies and gentlemen, your star of stage and screen, Shay Tate is back with us again. How do you do, madam?
I am doing pretty damn well. How are you doing?
I'm all right. So it's our monthly meetup to talk musicals. Say that 3 times fast. And
No.
and I decided with this second show that that I wanted to get more in your wheelhouse. I live to serve, and I was like, okay, I've gotten to know you a little bit better now. I've asked you a lot of, I asked you your favorite color, what you like to do on a date night, if you like long watches on a beach, and I learned from you that, boy, if it ain't horror and it ain't musicals, you don't know nothing about it. So that's how we landed on tonight's triple feature: the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Little Shop of Horrors, and Jekyll and Hyde, the musical. So how are you feeling about tonight's lineup, Shay?
I am feeling really good about tonight's lineup. I love all 3 of these, and I honestly have a lot to say about them.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to talk about why these 3 movies and a little bit of their history here. We're diving into a trio of cult favorite musicals that blur the lines between horror, comedy, camp, and tragedy. Little Shop of Horror, Rocky Horror Picture Show from 1975, which stars Tim Curry. Little Shop of Horrors from 1986, which stars Rick Moranis, otherwise known as Dark Helmet. And the 2001 film stage production of Jekyll and Hyde, the musical, featuring Knight Rider himself, Mr. Baywatch, David Hasselhoff, in a career-defining dual performance. Now, at first glance, these might seem wildly different productions, ranging from glam rock alien chaos. I once saw glam rock alien chaos open up for Metallica in 1989 at the Nassau Coliseum. Now you say, okay, you old geezer.
Okay, old man.
Thank you. To the doo-wop-infused plant horror, to a dark gothic tale of split identity. Put together, they tell a broader story about how musical theater has embraced monstrosity as metaphor. Each of these works asks, what happens when the line between man and monster blur? What desires are we really afraid of? And can we sing our way through the madness? The answer to that question is absolutely. I sing my way through most things. Eventually, I'm going to get divorced, and I'm going to sing my way through the divorce. Your Honor, Your Honor, I hate her, Your Honor. Sorry. Tim Curry's Frankenfooter. Tim Curry's character of Dr. Frankenfooter, is a force of nature, part scientist, part seducer, part destroyer of worlds. Rocky Horror was a revolution in form and content, upending gender norms, mocking genre tropes, and creating an interactive cult ritual that has endured for nearly 50 years. It's a cultural milestone not just because of what it is, but because of what is unleashed. A safe space for the weird, the queer, and the outsider. More on that in a moment. Rick Moranis' Seymour in Little Shop of Horrors gives us a very different kind of mad scientist. A nebbish pushover corrupted by power, ambition, and a bloodthirsty plant, as we all are at one time or another in our lives. The film is based on the Howard Ashman and Alan Menken stage musical, which blends the 1960s Motown stylings, of which I grew up with Faustian tragedy, capturing the dark side of the American dream. Gosh, is there any other side? And warning us what happens when we feed the things that promise us love and success. I'm gonna hold my snarky comments on that line. And then there's Jekyll and Hyde, the most classical of the three, but perhaps the most psychologically intense. Hasselhoff's performance, often memed, but undeniably committed, gives us a musical take on the Robert Louis Stevenson's timeless story of duality. It's a sweeping gothic powerhouse of repression, temptation, and the dangers of scientific hubris. A thematic cousin to both Frankenfurter and Seymour in Ambition and Eventual Ruin. Reviewing these three together allows us to trace how musicals have uniquely adapted horror and moral ambiguity to the stage and screen. From parody to tragedy to grand melodrama, these stories use music to heighten emotion, build absurdity, and expose the deep fears and fantasies lurking behind every monstrous transformation. So grab your fishnets, your gardening shears, or your top hat and cane. We're about to explore the darker, stranger side of musical theater, where monsters are often the ones singing the loudest. Which brings me back to you, my friend. We're going to start with the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Before I continue to read more things on my screen, why don't you tell me about your long and sordid relationship with this interesting feature?
So, Rocky Horror Picture Show is very near and dear to my heart. I grew up a theater kid. My dad's a musician. I grew up around tons of people who love music and performing and theater. And my brother actually introduced me to Rocky Horror when I was about 13 or 14. Mm-hmm. He was very much into cult classics, and he really loves odd, interesting to perform plays. And I, being an absolute horror nut, he was like, this shit's going to be right up your alley. And I absolutely loved it. One of the first times I had ever seen it, he had actually put up a projector in his garage, and we did the live version of it in his garage with like 3 or 4 of his other friends. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we brought like hot dogs and toilet paper, and he had the script out for all of the things that we were supposed to shout, and it was so much fun.
It sounds like
and
it was fun.
Also probably very disturbing to the neighbors.
You can make him a what? The neighbor kids are getting silly over there. So how many times have you gone to a local movie theater and seen a midnight screening of the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
So I've actually only gone once to a local movie theater for mm-hmm. Rocky Horror. Aside from my brother showing it in my garage, really the only places that I had the ability to see it in Iowa, mm-hmm. which is where I spent most of my adult life, was in people's backyards, in their living rooms, things like that. I had a very large friend group that was entirely from the theater. So that was almost at least a biannual occurrence where we would all get together mm-hmm. and hang out and watch Rocky Horror Picture Show and shout at the screen and all of that fun shit. But the only time.
Have you ever seen an actual stage production of it?
I have not gotten to see an actual stage production of it. Okay. They had actually done Rocky Horror just before I moved. I moved to Iowa, and just none of the theaters really had the opportunity to do it while I was still living there.
Gotcha. I have a cousin, a couple of years older than me, who's responsible for a few things in my life. She took me to my first club, got me into the kind of heavy metal I listen to this day. She also took me to my very first Rocky Horror Picture Show midnight showing, and this was in the early 90s, Levittown, New York, for those of you from Long Island. And we absolutely threw rice at the wedding and toilet paper. And, so I showed the Rocky Horror Picture Show to Lily. And this was, I don't think I've ever shown her anything that was more right up her alley. Yeah, especially at her current tender age of 14 years old, with all of her isms and tisms, this was the movie that no other movie has ever spoken to her the way Rocky Horror did. And so I had already seen it once over the weekend to kind of prepare for this podcast. So I watched it with my girlfriend, and I had to read on like what the hell I was watching, because when I saw it as a kid, I'd never seen it before, and I was more into throwing the rice and the toilet paper than I was paying attention to the movie. So here I had to actually like watch it and try to pull the plot out of this thing. And I had to go onto the wiki and like read it and throw stuff in the chat GPT, which I'll pull up in a second. But the second time around, I wanted to watch it again with her to see if I could get it a little bit better. But the beginning of it, I was doing dishes because we had just eaten dinner. So she's on the couch and she's listening to the Damn It Janet song. And I'm just yelling from the kitchen, "Let's go screw." And she can't hear totally what they're saying. So after the movie, she's just like, "Why were they saying 'let's go screw'?" And I'm like, "They weren't. That's your father being silly." Because you would yell things like that in the theater, and it's never left my brain. So what is the Rocky Horror Picture Show? The Rocky Horror Picture Show is a 1975 independent musical comedy horror film produced by Lou Adler and Michael White, and directed by Jim Sharman, and distributed by 20th Century Fox, now owned by Disney. Oh, Disney and their woke agenda, Shay. Look at this transgender LGBT.
Dr. Frankenfurter's a Disney princess?
Dr. Frankenfurter, firmly a Disney princess now.
Yes.
All right. I don't know if you're muted there or not. I didn't know if you were about to say something. Did I lose you, Shay?
Oh, looks like you only lost me for just a second. Did I lose you again?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to your sound there, friend.
I don't know. Sometimes it's a little weird. For some reason, my computer does not like streaming. But yeah, and this movie is fantastic. It's an absolute love letter to all of the.
I got nothing. Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, go back out and come back in while I'm continuing to read. All right, moving on. The screenplay was written by Sharman and Richard O'Brien, who also played the supporting role of Riff Raff. The film is based on the 1973 musical stage production, The Rocky Horror Show, with music, book, and lyrics by O'Brien. The production is a tribute to the science fiction and horror B movies of the 1930s through the 1960s. Stars Tim Curry in his debut. What a debut it was. Susan Sarandon, Barry Bostwick. The film is narrated by Charles Gray, with cast members from the original Royal Court Theatre, Roxy Theatre, and Belasco Productions, including Nell Campbell and Patricia Quinn. All right, make a sound.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you, yes.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Whatever you do, don't do it again.
Trying not to.
The film was shot in the UK at Brace Studios and on location at Old Country Estate named Oakley Court, best known for its earlier use by Hammer Film Productions. A number of props and set pieces were reused from the Hammer horror films. Although the film was both a parody of and a tribute to many kitsch science fiction and horror films, costume designer Sue Blaine conducted no research for her designs. Blaine has claimed that her creations for the film directly affected the development of punk rock fashion trends, such as torn fishnet stockings and colorfully dyed hair. Just to kind of skip ahead here, it had a budget of $1.4 million and was a wild success at $116 million. And I could read on. There's all kinds of stuff about LGBTQI influence, cultural influence. There's video games, all kinds of stuff here. let's get into what this is exactly. And like I said, I was trying to wrap my head around it. So I said, explain the plot of Rocky Horror Picture Show in 50 words or less. It says, a stranded couple seeks help at a spooky mansion where they meet Dr. Frankenfurter, a flamboyant alien scientist creating a muscle-bound man named Rocky. As bizarre guests gather, sexual tension, betrayal, and campy musical numbers unfold, leading to chaos, death, and the mansion's eventual return to outer space. And I said, all right, a little bit more. Newly engaged couple Brad and Janet get a flat tire and seek refuge in a strange castle owned by Dr. Frankenfurter, a seductive, cross-dressing alien scientist. He unveils his latest creation, Rocky, a man designed for pleasure. Over one wild musical night, Brad and Janet are seduced, alliances shift, and dark secrets emerge. Themes of sexual liberation, identity, and desire collide with B-movie horror tropes, culminating in murder, heartbreak, and the revelation that the castle is actually a spaceship returning to the planet Transsexual in the galaxy of Transylvania. It's just fantastic. All right, go ahead. Let's talk about this movie, Shay. You start.
I absolutely love this. It is an insane, sexed up, fever dream version of Frankenstein and Plan 9 from outer space. It absolutely is a love letter to every iteration of B cult movies, terrible films, just all of the shit that weird people like me watched as a kid, and it's the kind of movie that should have been a direct DVD release that ended up being an absolute cultural masterpiece.
Yeah, it actually struggled in the theater, but then New York and other places started doing them as midnight shows, and that's where it made its money.
Yeah, it did. And honestly, that is one of the hallmarks of a cult classic. A lot of cult classics do not do well in the box offices. And it's not until like decades later that it starts getting distributed. People start coming up with their own versions of it. And it becomes something much bigger than it was really intended to be. And I think Rocky Horror is a perfect example of what a cult classic is.
Watching the movie over the weekend, a couple of things jumped out at me. One, I've often said the line from Family Guy, Peter Griffin's line of it, I'm very aware I'm watching a performance.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody in this thing seems to be very aware they're in a musical. Like, this is not a lived-in world. This is a world built for performance. Also, Susan Sarandon's a good actress. You would not know it from this movie. She is the textbook, like, overacting, and it fits, and it's not bad. It fits the motif of the movie. Like, everyone's kind of overacting, but Susan Sarandon is ridiculous. Like,
yeah.
Like it was somebody it was like, what's my motivation? You're in a telenovela. Got it.
Oh yeah, and that's definitely a testament to how good she is. Like, it takes a lot to be good at something and then intentionally be bad at it.
Yeah, it's kind of a controlled chaos, like, a controlled overperformance.
Yeah.
To where she's, sometimes campy is intentional, sometimes it's accidental. This is intentionally campy. But because it's controlled, it's refined, it actually works. I thoroughly enjoy Susan Sarandon in this. I think she's hilarious. But because she's doing the, that. My God, how many? She faints like 5 times in the by the the first few minutes when they get to the house.
Yeah, that woman needs to get her blood pressure checked because she is constantly fainting.
The second thing that I noticed that I would like you to discuss with me is it is in fact called a musical, and I'm not arguing that point, but musicals differ in the rate at which a song occurs. We talked a little bit about this in our last musical review that we did for Legally Blonde, Mean Girls, and I don't remember the third. But there's usually some time and space between songs. Like an incident occurs and that causes a song to break out, as opposed to the more operatic structure where it's just one song into another. Like basically in this universe, everyone sings. Nobody has spoken dialogue.
Yeah, and I think that's also kind of the point, because this movie is very much considered one of the first rock operas.
Yeah. Waitress, that's the one I missed. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh. Yeah, so this movie is considered one of the first rock operas. That and Tommy, and there are a couple of others that are kind of escaping me. But that was also, yeah, I think The Wall was too. But The Wall is also a little more of a film set to
I was
the
gonna
music.
Say it's not, The Wall is not a stage musical as such.
Yeah,
it's sort of a like video performance opera, rock opera.
Yeah. But with stuff like Rocky Horror and Tommy, they really, really paved the way for the rock opera genre. And I think they also made it a little more acceptable for rock music to be part of musical theater. It's really evident in things like Phantom of the Opera, in parts of Jekyll and Hyde.
This is wall-to-wall music.
Yeah.
Because they start with the wedding, and then you're right into Damage Janet, and then there's them driving to the castle, and from the time they get in there, we are right into the Time Warp. We are right into Sweet Transvestite. We are right into I Can Make You a Man, and we are right into Hot Patootie, and it doesn't fucking stop. Like, I want to say maybe the back half is a little less loaded with music, but from the Time Warp pretty much to when they kill Meatloaf, it is wall to wall fucking music. And it's not a long break before we get to Touch Me, which I think was my daughter's favorite song. She thought that was hilarious. And it's like, which I thought was funny. By the way, her reaction to Sweet Transvestite when Tim Curry takes off the dress, and he's in the fishnets and everything, and she's just like, "All right, you go." Like she was very proud of Tim Curry and his presentation.
Oh yeah, like damn, you pulled that off really well.
It suits you, Tim Curry. It suits you. But anyway, that's one of the things I really marveled at. I will say this, and this is, I don't want to make any of this sound like I'm criticizing it from a negative place. I'm not. I'm just talking about it like a critic. So this is inevitably going to sound like I'm like negative, but it's not. It's really not. It's not intended to be. I was struggling with a lot of the music, and not because the music's bad. This is almost wall to wall awesome. Again, everything from Damn It Janet to the Time. I mean, like, who doesn't? First of all, if you don't like the Time Warp, get out. Just get the fuck out. Go back to Belarus where you came from or where you belong. Yeah, Time Warp is great. Sweet Transvestite. I don't know how well that goes over in our modern culture with certain camps of people, but still a great song. And Tim Curry pulls it off with aplomb. Hot Patootie by Meatloaf. Just, I want to do that. I want to chase people on a motorcycle singing Hot Patootie.
That'd be so much fun.
Either that or Let Me Sleep on It, baby, baby. Anyway, yes. So yeah, it's just wall to wall bangers. Rocky Horror Picture Show is some of the best music I've ever heard. My problem is I don't know why any of it's happening. Like, we get there, and I don't get a reasonable enough explanation for why we're doing the Time Warp. Don't get me wrong. I want to do the Time Warp again, and I think we should do the Time Warp again. But I don't know why we're doing the Time Warp again. And before anyone thoroughly explains why we're doing the time warp, in walks, undisputed 16-time world heavyweight champion, Dr. Frankenfooter, who is a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania. And his whole thing is, this is who I am and what I'm doing, and, pay attention to me. All right. And we barely get an explanation for anything else before we're into I can make you a man in just 7 days. That's why I had to keep going to ChatGPT. I'm like, what the fuck am I watching?
Oh, yeah. And I think that idea was very intentional.
Okay.
Because first of all, from the influences that it had, all of the really terrible B movies, the Ed Wood movies, Roger Corman, the John Waters stuff, a lot of them do just kind of throw you in.
Yeah, they do. Have you ever sat through the Trash trilogy? I have. I've reviewed it. I've suffered. I suffer for as an ally of the LGBTQI community. I have suffered for them and reviewed the entire John Waters Trash trilogy.
I have not seen nearly enough John Waters movies, but I am making a point to watch through a lot more of them because
we'll eventually do Shampoo for sure.
Huh?
We'll eventually do Shampoo for sure.
Okay, I'm down with that. But yeah, it's very indicative of the attitude of B movies from the 30s to the 60s, just kind of throws you in there. There's a bunch of weird shit. There's some terminology that you don't understand, but you're just kind of, it's assumed that you go along with it because you're watching a fucking B movie horror flick. It's part of that science fiction double feature attitude.
Yeah. So your contention is that this is intentional. It's buckle in because you're going for a ride and you're not meant to get it all. You're just meant to go for the ride and have an experience.
Yeah, and it's, I think also a kind of secondary idea of that is it feels like you're being thrown into the middle of a production.
Yeah.
I started, when I started doing theater and they realized that I was absolutely reliable in that, I would get shoved into productions in the middle of either runs or in the middle of tech week. And that really chaotic, just go with what's happening kind of energy is very much what it feels like backstage when you get tossed in as someone's replacement or as an extra hand that they needed because they didn't account for enough people.
Yet again, reason 117 why pro wrestling and musicals are the same fucking thing. Well, who am I working tonight? Just get out there, man. We're going to call it in the ring, brother. I have used the phrase, we're going to call it in the ring, brother, a lot as both metaphor and actual, because it really goes to what you're talking about of just get out there and go with the flow and make it up as you go.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, pro wrestling seems like monster truck ballet.
That is both... that is an apt description of it, and in some cases, an actual physical description of it. I think SummerSlam a year or two ago, Brock Lesnar lifted the entire ring up with with a tractor.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have to start watching a little bit of pro wrestling because that stuff seems a little insane.
Yeah, I'll have to send you that clip from SummerSlam. It was, yeesh. Poor Roman Reigns was like, why is this happening? But some other stuff to talk about. Like I said, I enjoy it. The second half, like I said, the first half of the movie, everything up to the point where they kill Eddie, I believe the character's name is Meatloaf.
Yeah.
It's just rapid fire. You're just getting pummeled. After that, it starts to slow down a bit. I wanted to get I realize this is the 70s. It was a different world, but I think, in the academic sense, there's grist for the mill to talk about the sequence where Dr. Frankenfurter crawls in bed with Susan Sarandon and, God, who plays Barry Boswick. So I believe, if I recall, he he kind of pulls a Revenge of the Nerds. He gets in there with her, and she thinks it's Brad, and it's not. And when she realizes that, she's like, "Get out!" And he is like, "Come on, baby," and she's like, "No, thank you." When he pulls the same shit with Brad, and it goes a little bit better for him. Not enough. They get interrupted by shenanigans, but it's an uncomfortable sequence of events. And maybe because I'm looking at it with modern eyes, and I'm just curious about your take on what the point of those two scenes were. That sequence.
So I think there's a lot of different ways that sequence can be
interpreted.
That's
why we're talking about it.
I think there's a whole bunch of levels to it. I think one, it was the late 1970s. It was a comedy trope.
Yeah.
So they put it in
you're
there.
You're in bed with the wrong person. Oh, Mr. Furley. You know, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's that you're in bed with the wrong person. On a deeper note, it's also partially showing how it's more of a hint to Frankenfurter being an alien, like an alien, and not just like this person's really, really weird kind of alien. Because it's kind of implied that he's a shapeshifter. Because they had the lights on in the background. He obviously had to have looked like Brad for some amount of time. And you can
see it in the silhouette.
Yeah.
He does change shape.
Yeah, he does change shape. So it is part of that illusion to him literally being an alien. And then there is also another metaphor underneath that, where it is a little more of an allusion to like a forced sexual awakening.
Yeah. I'll tell you where my thoughts went with it. Going along with what you started to say, that's why I cut in, and I'll let you get back to it. It was a very carefully tight-roped commentary about sexual repression and sexual rebirth, sexual awakening.
Yeah.
A lot of structures placed on people, especially going back 60 years, 50 years. A lot of expectations made of people, a lot of intolerance of non-heteronormative behavior. And the commentary is basically, look, this stuff is there and it exists in all of us. You know, Kinsey, monster that he was, spoke to, and we'll talk about this actually in a few weeks because we're reviewing his movie, the movie about him. But he talked about how, you know, going all the way into childhood, we are complex sexual creatures. And it's a little, the theory, I don't want to put this as my own thing, but, you know, the theory is it's a little too limiting, a little too obtuse to assume that sexuality is binary in everyone across the board, across the great expanse of humanity. And that to whatever degree this changes within one person to the next comes down to their experiences and opportunities and their own, you know, personal comfortability, which is also which can be and is often fluid. So there's another reading of this that you could go with, but I think they just start to get there and then they pull back from it. You know, again, once she realizes who, look, I'm actually surprised Lily didn't say anything when she was watching it, because she's of the age group to look at that and go, no, that's all wrong. It's all bad. You know, you absolutely have to know who you're in the bed with at all times, and there should be no chicanery, no foolery, no nothing. And as you said, yeah, well, 50 to 60 years ago, that was a common comedy trope. But, you know, you argue with the child of today and they go, but, you know, just because we used to do it doesn't make it good. And you see where you get you get pulled into the mire of this thing where whatever the intention was, it doesn't survive decades later any kind of scrutiny. It just gets obliterated.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think it also does get a little more of a pass due to the amount of BDSM influence that it has, because it implies a lot more like consensual non-consent than it does like, because it frames it a little more like that than something like Revenge of the Nerds did. Because throughout this entire thing, they're basically at a sex party. And like, they've been wandering around this sex party the entire time. And it doesn't necessarily make it right, but it is also kind of framed that way.
Yeah. There's sort of I mean, they don't know they're at a sex party, but everybody else there does. And one might argue, I'm not saying I'm arguing, but one might argue that if you came to a sex party, there's at least an expectation that you're at a sex party, and either you're in the role of voyeur or you're in the role of participant. The problem is they don't know that. And this is all, and at one point Brad even says, like, I just want to use the phone. Like, that's why we're here. We've been waiting patiently. And, Dr. Frankenfooter has another agenda. The other thing I will say about that is, fast forward a little bit, right? And Janet sees Brad and Dr. Frankenfooter beginning to have sex. I don't know how it's a little, because they're in silhouette, it was a little hard to see how far they got. They got further than he did with her. And she reacts poorly to it and decides, well, two can play at this game. And she goes after Rocky. And I don't want to be remiss in not acknowledging the fact that Rocky is pursued in that scene. Like, Touch Me is very much her going, come on, come and get it. And he's like, I'm just a baby. I have social anxiety. What do you want from me? And she's like, no. And I'm making light of it, but it triggered something in me, because I'm watching a lot of like relationship content on social media, and there's a ream of, in terms of themes that people are putting out there, of guys don't pursue women anymore. And I don't want to get way off on a tangent, but it's the result of years of don't pursue us, don't bother us, don't talk to us, leave us alone, etc., etc. So the answer to that is, okay, so we won't. You win. And then the women going around going, why don't you pursue us? And the implication is, no, only the pretty men should pursue us. And that's why I don't want to get into it. But 50, 60 years ago, she's got the red light on going, pursue me. Here I am. Because she does not necessarily want to assault Rocky, but she wants to have sex with him because she's hurt by what she saw Brad do, her fiance. So I wanted to get your take on the song Touch Me and that whole scene, and my linking it to this idea of, pursuing women, such as it is.
That one is a little bit of a weird situation for me. I was married for 10 years. I didn't really get an opportunity to date like at all.
You didn't miss anything. I'm just kidding. Keep going.
From some of what I've seen online, I don't think.
Oh, good. Then I absolutely meant that.
But I'm also one of those people that just doesn't really want to be talked to, like, ever.
You're the leave me alone at the gym girl, or at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's especially when I'm doing something.
Sure.
I don't like talking to people. I don't like being talked to. It makes me nervous.
I understand.
But for the time, having Janet be the one that is like, I want you for Rocky, it was very much a reversal of what people thought they should be doing.
Yeah, look, this movie editorializes in its own weirdo way a lot on gender and relationship norms from a lot of different angles. I mean, an easy kind of low-hanging fruit reading of the Rocky Horror Picture Show is, well, isn't this just a fun rock opera with a bunch of zany characters running around doing cartoony bullshit? Okay. Or dig a little deeper. And there's a lot going on here.
Oh yeah, there is definitely a lot going on there. It is a lot of a response of like how how repressed people were, especially with the setting. It's kind of implied that this is happening in the 50s.
Right.
And in the 50s, you found your high school sweetheart. You got married at 19. You had all the babies.
You were a spinster if you weren't married by your mid-20s.
And it was a really, really hard pushback on that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably incredibly shocking.
Oh,
even with like the sexual revolution of the 60s, to see all of these characters that are not only heterosexually interested in each other, but homosexually interested in each other with different levels of interest in sex, and seeing people change their levels of interest in sex, and seeing people who are super comfortable with sex and being around sex and being around people who are being sexual. I said that word so much that it sounds weird now.
You're fine. Just because we have 2 other films to get to. I want to say this, and then I'll give you the final word and we'll move on. The back half makes less sense than the first half. And when Riff Raff and the other lady show up at the end, and they were like, we are in charge now, and we are taking our ship back to Transylvania, and fuck off with all this nonsense. In the one sense, I was relieved. I'm like, oh, thank God it's over, because I'm tired of living in this fever dream. Like, yeah, especially like everything post when the doctor shows up, the wheelchair bound scientist. But everything after that, it's like, I just want this to end. I've been in Wonderland. I was very much like Alice. I have been here too long. I'm full up with nonsense. I need to go. I would like to go back to Great Britain now. So, like just about from the time they turned the statues on, I was like, hurry up and let's get this going already. So, I'm going to give you the final word here in terms of craft elements or anything else you want to speak to. What's the last thing you have to say about the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
I love the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It does have some problems, but there's not a single movie that doesn't have problems. And honestly, a lot of its problems are also problems that a lot of the stuff that it's referencing had. So I'm not 100% sure if a lot of that wasn't intentional.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an absolute masterpiece in theater. It's an absolute head trip. And it is an incredibly important film to both the gay community and I say gay, I mean like LGBT, everything, and also to the theater community, with as far forward as it pushed in so many aspects. It's a fantastic movie, and honestly, I think 14 is a perfect time to watch this movie.
Yeah. My last comment on this, I was thinking about it as you said it, but it actually had occurred to me earlier. given our political climate, which I do not necessarily want to spend a tremendous amount of time on, but given our current political climate, I'm wondering when the guardians of culture get around to making sure there are no versions of this available for anyone to see. Like this is such a charged movie, given our current wrestling with the trans community, that I'm like, about when do somebody figure out, hey, this still exists and is out there?
They can try, but Rocky Horror is never going away. Like, it's going to be one of those things. If it gets down to it, people will, as a protest, show underground screenings of Rocky Horror Picture Show.
To that point, you can still record things and, you know, screen capture and all of that. So should there ever be like a ban or anything, people can quick, you know, I mean, like I watch this PVOD.
And there's so many people that have DVDs, VHSs.
Yeah. It would be hard. You'd have to really be committed to getting rid of this thing to try.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say is, back when I was in college, I went to a Comic-Con on Long Island, and there were DVD copies of Song of the South. Try as hard as Disney has of getting rid of it. It's still, I have it still. I still have a copy of Song of the South on DVD. I got a bootleg. One of my prized possessions. So
that is absolutely hilarious.
I am committed to the gimmick. But yeah, I hope it doesn't go that far. I hope we come to our senses well before that. And remember that whether you agree or disagree with, you know, the existence of trans as a thing, these are still people. You know, that's the only thing I'm going to say about that, because I don't want to go into hyperbole. Ready to move on to Little Shop of Horrors?
Yes.
All righty. Little Shop. Let me tell you about Little Shop of Horrors. Little Shop. So last night I did a podcast with Alexis, and she rudely, unprofessionally broke my heart and hurt me. I was trying to make, she was complaining about country music, specifically the use of country music in The Bondsman, and she was like, you have to understand that I was subjected to country music a lot as a child, and therefore, like the Catholic, like anyone who's brought up in the Catholic Church, I rejected it as an adult, and as all good people do. And I said, well, that's not totally true, because I was brought up on doo-wop music, and I still love it to this day. I still sing it. And then Shay, let me talk to you, Shay. Shay, I sang to Alexis. I took the song that was in my heart and I shared it with her. And do you know what she did, Shay? She muted me. She muted my beautiful crooning.
What?
I sang, what's your name? And she muted me and she laughed at me. She did. Broke my heart.
Oh, so terrible.
It is. What kind of a person, what kind of a monster does that sort of thing?
I don't know. Probably the same kind of monster that feeds people to monster plants.
Exactly. So yeah, this is my strange way of introducing this topic. I grew up, as I said, on the my parents are boomers, and every Saturday was clean the house day, and we were a musical household. So every Saturday and Sunday was WCBS FM, Cousin Brucey, and it was, you know, the doo-wop era, songs of the 50s and 60s, Elvis, all of that. And, you know, so I grew up with Motown, and when Little Shop of Horrors came out and it had that Motown influence, that doo-wop influence to it, you want to talk about another show with nothing but bangers. This is my shit right here. Like, I know I'm like heavy metal guy, but I like a little bit of soul, sister. And Little Shop of Horrors is my fucking jam.
Oh yeah, and Little Shop of Horrors was probably my introduction to Motown style music. But before we get into that, I have a weird little anecdote. I had actually seen the original, the non-musical.
Oh, the black and white film,
the
one because he has to be a contrarian. Robert Winfrey says it's the best version of Little Shop of Horrors.
These are two very different things. I know they're based off of the same thing, but you kind of can't compare a.
Talk to Robert. He's Robert. But yes, that's what you're referring to. You're referring to the original black and white non-musical motion picture.
Yes. So I had seen the original black and white non-musical motion picture. I absolutely loved it because I love terrible old horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got introduced to this because I was talking to my brother, and I was saying, yeah, I got this multi-pack of old horror movies. I just watched Little Shop of Horrors. He was like, how is that in with Nosferatu and the Bat? And I was like, because it's old and there's no copyright on it anymore.
Because it's in the public domain.
Yeah. So yeah, we started having a conversation. He was like, "This is a musical." I was like, "The version that I watched is not a musical." And so we put the musical version up on the shop computer because we work together. And for some reason, my father decided that it was a good idea to give 2 musical theater kids with ADHD free reign over the playlist.
Sounds like the beginning of a joke.
A lot of the time it was. We scared a few people.
I would imagine, yeah.
But yeah, and I watched Little Shop of Horrors. It was the first time that I had really heard Motown music. Because I grew up in a place that was very much like country western and
the antithesis of Motown.
Yeah, basically the antithesis of Motown.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I didn't realize that it was a genre for a good long while.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that the Little Shop of Horrors music was absolutely fantastic, and that there should be more of it.
Yes, I saw this as a kid when it came out. So 86, I'm 10, and if I didn't see it in the theater directly, I saw it once it got on television. Probably on HBO.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, I can sing most of the songs. Let me tell you how, like, we often talk about like memeable or quotable movies. Movies that, like Ghostbusters is one where, when I hand somebody something, I say, Egon, here's your mucus. I've often said, we came, we saw, we kicked its ass. Little Shop of Horrors is right up there. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at somebody and said, you'll be a dentist and a success. Who hasn't just yelled candy bar? Oh, candy bar, candy bar. I have often, for whatever the reasons are, have said, feed me Seymour. And again, I sing the songs constantly. Like to this day, I'll still sing "You'll Be a Dentist" or "Feed Me Seymour." I fucking belt out "Suddenly Seymour." I don't know what possesses me to do this, but I'll just be "Suddenly Seymour." There's so many fun moments in that movie. It left an indelible impression on me as a kid to the point where I don't watch a lot of stuff repeatedly. I have too much stuff to watch for this stupid podcast that I do to watch things on repeat. But I have watched Little Shop of Horrors a bunch. That's one of those movies where I've watched it repeatedly. When Lily started to show an interest and a proficiency in musical theater way back when she was little, one of the first musicals I showed her was Little Shop of Horrors. Scared the piss out of her as a good horror musical should. But she also loved it, and I remember she also would sing the songs. Like, something about the music in this just hits most humans just such the right way that it stays with you forever. It is darn near perfect.
Oh yeah, it's that perfect mix of classic musical theater, easy to sing, with that really awesome funky Motown twist and the little bit of weird spooky that just gets it stuck in your head forever.
Yeah, I'll talk about this in a little bit, but I'll tell you, watching it at almost 50 having been through what I've been through in the last couple of years, this also hit differently. Like the commentary about like domestic violence and relationship dynamics, and some of the stuff between Seymour and Audrey 2. Frankly, between Seymour and Audrey 2 and Audrey 1. Like,
yeah,
I don't, because it's such a silly piece of art that I don't think people realize how resonant it is with today's current relationship culture.
Oh yeah, and a lot of people can kind of gloss over a lot of the darker elements of, honestly, a lot of stuff. Just because it's got catchy tunes and it's upbeat and you can dance to it, or a lot of that.
It features a jive man-eating plant. They may miss the subtle remarks about narcissism.
Yeah.
So the subtle remarks of narcissism is the phrase that pays here on the Rattlenger Broadcasting Network. So let's get into what this is. Little Shop of Horrors is a 1986 American horror comedy music film directed by Frank Oz, one of cinema's great gods. It is an adaptation of the 1982 off-Broadway musical of the same name by composer Alan Menken and writer Howard Ashman, which is in itself an adaptation of the 1960 film Little Shop of Horrors by director Roger Corman, another one of Hollywood's great treasures.
Yeah.
The film, which centers on a floral shop worker who discovers a sentient carnivorous plant that feeds on human blood, stars Rick Moranis, Ellen Green, Vincent Gardenia, the great Steve Martin. Alexis and I do Only Murders in the Building, and I've mentioned several times what a treasure Steve Martin is, and he's so good in this. It's so great.
Oh yeah, he is so damn fantastic. Like that is cartoon villain levels of evil.
Yeah.
And when applied to a dentist, it's perfect.
He is part of the Legion of Doom of just evil villains in film.
Yeah.
And the voice of Levi Stubbs, who's beyond great. The film also features special appearances by every comedian on the planet. Jim Belushi, John Candy, Christopher Guest, and Candy Bar Bill Murray. It was produced by David Geffen through the Geffen Company and released by Warner Brothers on December 19, 1986. It grossed $39 million domestically and $50 million internationally for a worldwide total of $54 million on a budget of $25 million. So just a little over profitable if you go by the times 2 method. Little Shop of Horrors was filmed on the Albert R. Broccoli's 007 stage at the Pinewood Studios in England, where a downtown, when you go downtown, set complete with an overhead train track was constructed. Produced on a budget of $25 million, in contrast to the original 1960 film, which, according to Carmen, only cost 2 shillings and a halfpenny. It was well received by critics and audiences alike, eventually developing a cult following. The film's original 23-minute finale, based on the musical's ending, was rewritten and reshot at the test audiences did not react. Yeah, isn't the original version of this The Plant Wins?
Yeah. So the original version of it was supposed to be. So Audrey had gotten big enough that they sent out a signal, and all of the rest of the Audreys came in, and like Audrey kept getting bigger, and it was almost like a Godzilla thing. And Audrey like started destroying the city. And in some of the stage plays, they actually do the original ending, and Audrey will like start coming out into the audience.
I didn't consent to this. Oh God. How is that different from the 1960s black and white film?
I think that is the ending of the 1960s black and white film.
Is that it calls home and home invades?
Yeah, I remember that it didn't have a particularly happy ending.
Right.
Either Audrey got eaten and Seymour chopped the plant up, or it ended up taking over the world. I want to say it ended up taking over the world.
Right.
But I have struggled to find the original since I found it in that multi-pack of old public domain movies.
It's got to be on YouTube somewhere. Everything is.
It has to be on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah.
I got to find it. I got to find a physical version of that because I love that movie so much.
The plot is basically this: we have a flower shop that is going out of business, and if Seymour, and this is where Seymour lives. So if the flower shop goes, so he will be homeless, and he is a purveyor of odd and interesting plants. So he's got one that he procured from an old racist Chinese stereotype, and he is told, bring the plant up to the front because maybe it'll attract business and we can save the shop. And so he does, and it works. But then just as immediately as it works, it fails because Audrey is dying. He has not figured out how to keep this plant alive. At which point he's cleaning up the shop and he pricks himself on a thorn, which gets the attention of the plant. And the plant makes gestures to say, hey, I want some of that right there. So he begins to feed the plant with his own blood, enough that eventually it evolves into a talking plant. And it tells him, you need to feed me more, and you need to feed me better. Along the same lines of this is a domestic violence relationship between an abusive... And upon viewing as an adult, with everything else that I've experienced in the last few years, what I assume is some sort of BDSM relationship between Steve Martin and... what the fuck's the actress's name? Ellen Green. Again, 86 and musical, so they don't go into it too much, but it is... they're definitely signaling that that they are riding that line between domestic violence and BDSM. It is often blurred. In any case, Rick Moranis is in love with Ellen Green because Ellen Green is the pretty girl lead in the movie, as it always goes. And so the plant convinces him. It's like, look, I'm not saying feed me innocent children yet, but maybe kill him. He's hurting the woman that you love, and he's a bad guy, and not everyone deserves to live, right? And Rick Moranis, being easily manipulated and a bit desperate, says, all right, I will commence to kill this man for you. And so he does. And the plant gets bigger. At which point the shop owner then figures out what's what and tells him, if you leave town and tell me how to feed the plant, I won't report you to the cops that you murdered the dentist. At which point Audrey 2, having been named by Rick Moranis, eats the flower shop owner. With him out of the way, they are experiencing fame and fortune on like a level they had ever had before. Everyone wants a piece of Rick Moranis and this plant. The plant is only getting bigger and bigger, and the plant is like, you can't stop now. And Rick Moranis is like, I'd really like to, though. Like, this seems like it's getting unwieldy. So him and Audrey 1 decide that they're just going to abandon the plant and the shop and get the fuck out of Dodge. And the plant, being the smartest character in the entire musical, figures this out, decides to manipulate Audrey into coming back to the plant so that he can put her in peril, which he does. And Rick Moranis comes and finds her, saves her from the man-eating plant, and says, all right, I have had all I can stand, and I can't stand no more. And so we have the epic showdown between the heel Audrey 2 and our defending champion, Seymour. This goes poorly for Seymour, as it does for all baby faces. And right before the plant is about to have his final victory and put an end to Seymour having become strong enough to exist on its own, Seymour fights from underneath, like every good baby face, finds an exposed electric wire and shoves it into the plant unconsensually and blows it the fuck up. Like the Death Star. So, at which point, Rick Moranis and a slightly injured Audrey go off into the sunset. Somewhere that's green, that's where they land. And in the final shot of the movie, there was a small little man-eating plant smiling menacingly at the audience. And everyone goes, yay! All right, so that's the plot of Little Shop of Horrors. Tell me about this movie, the craft elements review.
So this movie is done fantastically. The sets do not look real because they're not supposed to look real.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those, it's supposed to be in a fantasy land. It is a very theatrical theater performance. it is another love letter to the John Waters, Roger Corman, Ed Wood B movies. And I think it does fantastic. They managed to make Skid Row, which is
Down on Skid Row.
yeah.
I don't want to talk about this movie. I want to sing it at you.
Which is one of the most horrible places that you could possibly live.
When you go downtown on Skid Row, yes.
Yeah.
You know, when you know what happens when you're on Skid Row is you might get 18 in life. Please tell me you got that reference. I won't be able to sleep tonight if you don't get that reference.
I don't think I did.
Oh, for fuck's sake, it's like talking to a child. So, Skid Row, man. 18 in life. Ricky was a young boy. No? All right, somewhere out there, Jesse knows what I'm talking about.
Oh.
Keep going. When we're done here, your homework is to go on Spotify and go listen to 18 in Life by Skid Row.
Okay.
You'll thank me tomorrow. I promise.
Okay. But yeah, it's this horrible place, but it's still teeming with life. There is still color in the sets, and it.
Man, we on the split shift. We got to 7th grade and we split. Sorry, keep going. You're gonna have to just push through this. I'm gonna keep doing that.
But yeah, and the set gives you an absolute suspension of disbelief. Like, absolutely. From the get-go, the sets, the costumes, everything, it puts you in this world where you don't know what time period it is, where they are. You just know this is a place in a time.
You assume it's the 50s. You know,
you do kind of assume that it's the 50s.
Steve Martin's playing kind of a greaser. The costuming, and you'd be more of the expert on this than I would be, but the costumes and the setting evoke. See, I say that, but you could go 50s or 70s. It's weird. It's like they couldn't decide on which time period they wanted, so they took the worst parts from all of them.
Yeah, and I mean, and I very much believe that that's an intentional decision. It is the worst parts of every time period that is not now.
Yeah, it was like, well, you figure it was 1986, and we're talking, the 50s. So they probably took a 30-year time span from the 50s to the 80s and went the worst parts of all of it.
Yeah. And all of it sets up a really beautiful suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
Where from the get-go,
it's Ozian, it's otherworldly.
Yes, it is. It's very otherworldly. It's very much a place where you wholeheartedly believe that there could be an alien plant eating people in the burrow next to you.
Yes.
But it is absolutely fantastic. It is beautifully done. Like even with the costuming being the worst parts of 3 different decades, they still do it absolutely wonderfully. Everything is cohesive within itself, even if it is not cohesive according to the world that we live in.
First of all, this is a nearly perfect movie. The plot is, as I said, it is about as straightforward a plot as you're going to get. This is efficient. I think the runtime on this is, it's 94 minutes. We are in and out. I mean, like, I wish other movies need to learn from Little Shop of Horrors. You don't need 2 to 3 hours to tell your story. You can get it done in 90 minutes, and this got it done in 90 minutes with 87 different songs.
Oh, yeah.
And this, like I was talking about with Rocky Horror, where it just feels like they're just singing to sing. They don't sing to move the plot along. This one does. When they break into song, they are addressing an issue in the movie, or they are world building. When the girls are singing about downtown and Skid Row, they're world building. When Seymour is singing about his troubles, he's reflecting on what to do. He's singing through his conflict with murdering somebody and feeding a man-eating plant. When him and Audrey are singing together, when they're doing Suddenly Seymour, they're singing about getting themselves out of this situation and living a better life, living the American dream, as it was.
Yeah.
Even like Feed Me Seymour. Feed Me Seymour is a deceitful, manipulative, gaslighting, personality disordered, access to fucking rock song.
It is a toxic relationship in 3.5 minutes.
I'm glad you said toxic relationship. I want to share something with you. I said to ChatGPT, I said, so I'm watching Little Shop of Horrors with Rick Moranis for a review this Thursday, and I had a funny thought. If my own experience in dating TikToks are to be received, many people out there are Audrey too. And the ChatGPT says, that's a solid bit. Feed Me Seymour. Feed Me Seymour becomes validate me, pay my bills, and tell me I'm pretty. There's definitely a cynical but funny take to be had there about modern dating expectations and the transactional nature of a lot of relationships these days. Audrey 2 isn't just a killer plant. It's a metaphor for anyone who shows up saying, you'll be happy if you just keep giving me more and more and more. And this goes on to talk about how at the end of the day, Audrey 2 wasn't interested in Seymour at all. It was a means to an end to get him to a place of discard. Mm-hmm. These terms should sound familiar to some of you. It's keep giving me more, and it's never enough, and the goalposts keep moving, and then when there's no more use for Seymour, the plant just discards him like he's nothing. And there's Seymour going, I thought we had something. I thought I meant something to you. I thought we had a relationship here. And the plant's like, nope, I just needed you to get to the point where I am now where I don't need you.
Yeah.
And there's Seymour who's been had. But the road to get there, boy, is Audrey 2 acting like he's Seymour's best friend. He's looking like he's got his best interest. But the other side of that is how much Audrey 2 is chipping away at Seymour, at what little self-respect Seymour has.
Yeah.
You didn't have nothing till you met me. Come on, what'll it be? Like that kind of a thing. Like you said, toxic relationship. And that is, I think that's one of why this thing has endured as long as it has, because maybe you don't realize it as you're watching it, but the more you think about it, the more you realize, oh my God, this is one of the more relatable stories. It's just, cocked up with this stupid giant, alien plant, which makes it sound absurd, but take away the plant part of it and just think about the characters and how they're interacting. And it's a highly human, relatable story. And you look at the relationship between the dentist, Steve Martin's character, and Audrey. And she doesn't believe she deserves better. She says to Seymour, I was born in the gutter. Ellen Green, first of all, have you ever seen somebody talk like they're the character, like they're Howard's wife from The Big Bang Theory, but sing like they're an opera singer, like she's fucking Tarja from Nightwish? Holy cow, what a just speak to that for just a moment for me. The transition in Ellen Green's line delivery to her singing voice.
Oh yeah, it is absolutely fantastic. Especially the transition from how smooth that transition was in Someplace It's Green.
Yeah.
Because she starts out with that high-pitched, mousy squeak.
Somewhere that's green. Like she sounds like fucking Edith from All in the Family. Somewhere that's green, Archie. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, and by the end of that song, she is belting.
Yeah, she sounds like what the fuck's her name from the Bangles doing God, now I can't remember the name of the song, but she fucking hits almost like a falsetto. And you're like, holy crap, where did that come from?
And it is so fantastic. And just that tone shift it showed so much about the character.
Right.
Like there was no sets, there was no dialogue, like just the change in the way she was singing.
Right.
showed so much character development, going from I don't deserve anything.
Yeah, like I said, I was born, as she said, I was born in the gutter. You know,
Yeah.
I don't deserve a nice man. I don't deserve anything. I deserve, like, raise your hand if you've ever, if you know someone or if you yourself have felt like this. I deserve to be beaten. You know, I don't deserve good treatment because I'm a bad person and I come from a bad place. I deserve bad things that happen to me. You know, and it's like she chases him. At one point, she literally falls off his motorcycle and she's running after him down the block.
Yeah.
You know, but Seymour offers her an alternative, and in a rare thing for that kind of, I'm trying not to make a joke out of it, but in a rare thing for that kind of a relationship, she actually sees a way out with Seymour and was like, you know what? Maybe I don't deserve Seymour, but I'm
gonna go for it anyway.
I'm gonna go for it anyway. I mean, then it helps. You know, the dentist is murdered, and what other choice does she have? But you know, it's still the relationship dynamics between those three characters. And my God, one of my favorite lines. It's a throwaway line, kind of, but for me, it hits deeper than I think it was maybe intended to, or maybe it was, and just people don't get it. But right about the time that the dentist dies from overdose, he looks at Seymour, who was there to kill him and just didn't get he didn't get a chance to do it himself because he did it to him, because the dentist did it to himself. And he looks at him and he realizes what he had been there for all along. And he's like, "What'd I do to you?" And Seymour's like, "It's not what you did to me, it's what you did to her." And the best line of this movie, her who?
Yeah, like that he's been such a terrible person for so damn long.
And he views her as so less than human.
Yeah, that he didn't even remember her.
Right. She's such an inconsequential part of his life. But every scene that they have together, you know, he insists she call him doctor. He, you know, he's screaming at her and, you know, yelling at her for falling off the bike and all of this other stuff. You know, but then when it came right down to it, she meant nothing to him. Less than nothing. Didn't even remember her. And, you know, and meanwhile, Seymour's there and Seymour's ready to commit murder over her. So it's really, really good stuff. Absolutely, like I said, love the soulful music in this. You know, when they stop and sing, you know, it's good stuff. The again, directed by Frank Oz, you know, master of the Muppets, along with Jim Henson. So Audrey too. I mean, looks like a looks like a puppeteered plant.
Yeah.
And I'm not, you know, but I'll tell you, that puppeteered plant looks better than most CGI these days.
Oh yeah, it absolutely does. And I think with the fact that Audrey is puppeteered, especially in the stage plays, I think it gives a lot more creative freedom to future renditions. Because I would honestly love to see a version of Audrey that is based off of other carnivorous plants.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is Audrey's, because it's puppeteered and there's only so much they can do with it, everything is intentional. They can't just up the ante with Audrey and, you know, and have tentacles coming out of it like, you know, it's someone's, you know, hentai fantasy. It's like, you know, it's not a fucking Kraken. You know, they have to be very precise with what they do with it, because if they do too much, they're going to break the damn thing. But, you know,
yeah.
So and I think that level of restraint adds to the tension whenever it's doing stuff.
Oh yeah, because the most terrifying monsters are the ones that make sense in the world that we exist in. A lot of horror movie monsters in recent years have failed because a lot of them are completely existent in the digital world. When you don't have those restraints, you can tend to make decisions that kind of break the suspension of disbelief.
Well, look at the scene where he saves Audrey. It's ridiculous on its face.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous.
He's like The Rock trying to reach for the title in SummerSlam against Triple H. Hey! You know, he's like fumbling with it. It looks dumb as hell, but because this thing is very physical, there's weight to it, and because of the relationship between him and Audrey, where he's desperate to save her from this thing, it actually works despite how silly it looks.
Oh yeah, it absolutely does. And having that gargantuan thing that's actually there, it also emphasizes the struggle, because he's genuinely fucking struggling to try and get to that damn plant thing.
Yeah. And he is desperately trying to get her out of there. And I like the fact that despite her being in the jowls of this carnivorous sharp-toothed plant, she had some bruises, some torn clothing, and what looked like she'd been in a coal mine.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know what decision it was to, like, I mean, I can go into botany and maybe try to affirm that it was like digestive juice, but
by the way, is in the inside of Audrey's gullet the most like scariest thing you've ever seen? That's a rough visage.
Yeah, that is pretty rough. Although I did some research on carnivorous plants a few months ago, and
for shits and giggles, for a bet, what are you?
Because I have ADHD. And I looked at a plant that was like, oh, that's scary. I wonder if there's another scary looking plant.
Can't you scroll TikTok for dating memes like a normal person?
No.
Fair enough. All right. Anything else about Little Shop of Horrors is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love talking about it with you. I could talk about this for hours. I could sing the whole goddamn thing right now, but we do not want to be here for another hour. So I will give you the final word on the Little Shop of Horrors, Little Shop of Terrors, watch them drop. Little Shop of Horrors, no. All right.
Yeah, Little Shop of Horrors is fantastic. It's about as close to perfect of a movie as you can get, and it is honestly, I think it probably is the perfect movie musical, or at least the best example of a movie musical that we can get. Like it's right next to The Producers, with how tight all of the plot line is, with how beautiful all of the sets and everything are, with great character development. It's definitely one of the best musicals to have ever been put to film.
It is a depressing reminder about how talented people in Hollywood were in the 80s, and something I've been thinking a lot about as of late, that they don't make them like they used to.
Yeah.
So with that being said, this was your pick, because I think I had said, I know you're in love with Rocky Horror, so I want to do that one. And if we're going to do that one, we should do Little Shop of Horrors. And I went, all right, Shay, pick the last one. And you fucking took a left turn at Albuquerque on me and picked an actual filming of a musical, kind of like Legally Blonde, the musical, which seems to be a theme with you. You picked this, the 2001 Jekyll and Hyde direct from Broadway, starring David Hasselhoff. Why, Shay? Why?
Because I am a weirdo who actually really loves the filming of Broadway shows. It's one of the, for the longest damn time, it was one of the only ways that I could get anywhere near actually seeing a Broadway musical, like an actual professional musical. And honestly, it's still one of the biggest ways that the new musicals get shown, and how they get popular. Like, as soon as something comes out, if it is any good, I have at least 3 or 4 of my theater friends that are like, or I did when I was in Iowa, but I live 3.5 hours away from all of my friends now. But they were like, I got the DVD of the new thing. I bought it off of a dude that works in the theater. You want to watch it with me? It's not legal.
It's great.
But Yeah, and I do really wish that they would make a movie of this at some point. But it's an absolutely fantastic musical. I started listening to the original Broadway cast, I think about 2 or 3 years before this came out. Then this came out, and Hasselhoff is surprising. I did not know that Hasselhoff could act.
It's really funny. Ain't you ever seen no Knight Rider?
I have not.
Yeah, he's fucking intense in this thing. So I have less of a relationship with Jekyll and Hyde than you do, or any of the previous two movies. I think I took a hot girl in my college days to go see Jekyll and Hyde with Sebastian Bach from Skid fucking Row, one of the great bands of the late 80s, early 90s. For God's sake, what's wrong with? Anyway, sorry.
I will absolutely look them up as soon as we're done with this.
Thank you. I have a tick now. But so yes, they got when he was done with Skid Row, I think they got Sebastian Bach to do a run of Jekyll and Hyde, which would have had to have been in the late 90s if it was in college. And I don't remember a whole lot about it. I'm fairly certain I may have slept through it, but that's about the only time I've ever seen Jekyll and Hyde. I haven't read the book, and I don't know if there's a movie version of this, not the musical, just any old movie version. But
there's a ton of them.
Okay, I almost can guarantee I've never seen any of them. Yeah, I don't have a great relationship with the Jekyll and Hyde thing, though. Interesting thing about that, because my son asked me what we were doing tonight, and if I was doing a podcast or not, and I told him, no, I'm doing this, what I'm doing with you now, and I told him what movies it was, and I get to Jekyll and Hyde, and he was like, was Jekyll and Hyde basically what the Incredible Hulk was based off of? And I was like, yeah, more or less. And we started talking about the duality of man and the demon within us all, and the religious implications of living a life where you sacrifice and you resist temptation, you resist the quote unquote the inner demon inside of you, so that you can at the end of at the end of a good life you can go to heaven and all this other stuff. I said there's a lot of that that Jekyll and Hyde deals with, and that because it's so resonant with human beings and human nature. When when Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and all them were creating comic book characters, it was a go-to thing to deal with in the creation of the Incredible Hulk. And I said all this to him in the car ride home, and then we listened to gangster rap, because that's how my family goes. Because I tell you what, Shay, being the musical podcast and all, we cannot get enough of that gangster shit. That's a West Side Connection song. Okay. Anyway, so with all that being said, Jekyll and Hyde Direct from Broadway is a 2001 television film of the Broadway production of the 1990 musical Jekyll and Hyde, as captured live in performance on Broadway, featuring the show's final Broadway cast. The show was captured at Broadway's Plymouth Theater in New York City, December 2000, utilizing multiple high-definition cameras by Broadway Worldwide. The film was released March 10, 2001 as a one-night-only event in 7 digital cinemas in Boston, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Dallas, New York, Phoenix, and Washington, D.C., with showings on cable and satellite pay-per-view channels in the U.S., Canada, and Latin America. This marked the first time that a non-film had been distributed for a digital cinema showing. The program was released on DVD and VHS September 11, 2001. Yeesh. By Good Times Video, with the DVD re-released November 14, 2006 by Image Entertainment. HBO bought the program in December of 2002 for a 2-year contract on the network. I watched it on YouTube. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes long. Not a whole lot else on it. I've heard, in just a little bit of research I did on this, that some people think it's a little over the top and campy and over dramatic. Some people think it hits the right pitch. Before I get into the premise of this thing, what's your call on that?
I think it is both. It is a little over the top. It is a little bit campy, but it's also following a tradition. This is very much this is very much a classic horror movie. This is following in the footsteps of, I believe there was a Jekyll and Hyde in the 1920s. They did another Jekyll and Hyde in the 60s. I believe Hammer did a Jekyll and Hyde. There were a few independent versions of Jekyll and Hyde. And all of them tended a little more on the campy side.
Right.
It is a very heavy subject matter. So I think in order to make it a little more digestible, and even in the book, in order to make it a little more digestible, they did make it a little bit more fantastical, a little bit more campy. Because in the book by Robert Louis Stevenson, Mr. Hyde is described as very ape-like, with a greenish pallor to his skin. He looks broken. He looks diseased. But the image that he conjures with that is a little bit more of a cartoon villain.
Yeah.
Like, with his description of it, it very much is reminiscent of, and this is way before any of this stuff ever existed, of like Snidely Whiplash and a lot of the villains from the 1940s and 50s cartoons that were meant for kids. Like, it was very much an exaggeration of the worst parts of ourselves.
Right.
And I think it was very much designed that way to make a lot more of the point, kind of like how Little Shop and Rocky Horror both have undertones and relationship themes that are almost hidden underneath this colorful, bright facade. And I think Jekyll and Hyde does a really good job at being both, because it is both a little bit campy and it is a little bit tonally serious.
So the plot of this thing, that was good, by the way. The plot of this thing is basically we have a doctor, and he is, with the use of the pharmaceuticals of the time, trying to separate man's worst parts of himself from man himself. We should all be good, godly, perfect creatures. And if we can only do away with the darkest parts of our soul, then we will, achieve God's dream for us all. And so he says, "Well, give me a." So he says to the upper class people of the time, the people running the prison, if you would only give me one prisoner that I could experiment on and try these drugs, I will do a great service for all of us. I will do God's work. And they say, "What are you, nuts? I'm not giving you a prisoner. What's the matter with you?" And so and he is engaged to a rich woman, the daughter of one of those people. And she was like, "Oh, but you work so much, you just enjoy life, Dr. Jekyll. Don't be so don't get so lost in your work you lose your head." And he says, "Lose my head? That's a great idea. What I'll do is I'll experiment on myself, and we wonder where we get Dr. Banner and the Hulk from." And he goes, "I will just do this to myself, and I will show these people that what I'm doing here is the right thing." And so it goes as well as you might expect. It has the effect of at various times with little control, turning him into this version of himself that is all want, that is all impulse, the darkest parts of his nature. Around this time, we meet one of the local hookers, and of course, the Hyde character, being the darkest parts of Dr. Jekyll, forms a relationship with the hooker, as all good dark men do, and eventually, he is, there's a battle for control of his soul between Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and that's more or less Act 1. Act 2, wanting to take revenge for the mistreatment, Hyde starts killing all these people. He eventually gets around to the hooker, and at the end, he gets, months later, after all this is done, he goes to marry the woman and turns into Hyde at that time, and says, "Look, this is only going to get worse. Just kill me," and like all good white men, especially in the modern era, just says, "Kill me now. Just let me die. Just kill me now." And of course, his friend won't do it, because who wants to murder their own friend? And at which one he runs himself through. and it ends tragically, and that is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Did I miss anything of importance?
I don't think so.
Okay, pretty like I sped through that, but I'll kick this off and I'll throw it to you. It's a good musical. I think it captures the gothic elements of of its origin quite well. I think it does a great job of speaking to that sense of impulse control that need to not want to act out on your worst impulses and thoughts. David Hasselhoff is fucking intense. Like, even as like he spends a large portion of this, especially the beginning of it, as just Dr. Jekyll, and he is got a booming voice and really intense eyes, and like I was convinced he was going to murder those people just as Dr. Jekyll. Just like,
David Hasselhoff is just kind of scary as even playing a mild-mannered scientist, he is kind of scary.
There's nothing mild or mannered about him. It's like Dr. Jekyll's like, I'm gonna kill all you motherfuckers tonight. Like he's intense, man. The rest of it, it's staged rather minimally. There's not, this isn't fucking Legally Blonde the musical with 1,000 extras and dancers and whatnot. This was a pretty controlled cast. It was good lighting in it, great costumes. The songs in it are really pretty. Nothing. I'd have to go back and listen to it again. And again, I watched this. I was a little distracted. I was doing this at work, but I would, like I said, I think the music in it is entertaining and competent, but nothing really jumped out at me. So I will let you tell us what you think of the musical and any of the finer points that I did not address.
Again, I absolutely love this musical. I think the music is fantastic. It is very, very classic Broadway. I know that that's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's definitely something that I thoroughly enjoy.
Oh, it's definitely a throwback to like the heyday of like Andrew Lloyd Webber and Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Oh yeah, it's definitely based off of like Andrew Lloyd words.
Me too.
Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom the Opera, and quite a few of the other rock musicals that were around at the time. And it doesn't necessarily push the envelope, but I think with the subject matter, it doesn't really need to. It's a classic horror story. It is a story that's been told time and again, and I think it is a fantastic take. While it's not a new take on it, but it is very enjoyable. It's a wonderful reiteration. In this particular one, I do agree with you. The sets were a little bit sparse. It didn't have quite enough extras, but I also think that this was on its way out of Broadway. So I feel like seeing it in its heyday might have been a much better experience, having all of the sets and way more extras and just being at the top of what it could have been would have been a little bit better. But for the time period that they had done this in, and the fact that they were not filming live musicals at that point in time, I do think this is a really fantastic rendition. And I think it's wonderful that it exists at all, because again, it's one of those, if we don't film these things, it doesn't get out past New York.
Right.
Even in the age of social media, there are so many people that can't get to New York, whether it's because of money or because they live on the other side of the country or because maybe their family doesn't approve of their interests. And I think having these filmed versions of musicals are really important.
I would agree.
And I also think that the thematic elements they're definitely not lost. And I think that's part of why this was a little bit more sparse, because they were really trying to emphasize the heavier elements. It's kind of the opposite of what Rocky Horror and Little Shop of Horrors did. Little Shop of Horrors very much hid some very deep meanings behind bright colors and camp and a fast pace.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this musical, in order to bring out the deeper meanings and the deeper themes, really it slowed the pace down a little bit. It pushed all of everything else a little bit to the backside, and it really did allow, especially with Hasselhoff playing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, both at the same damn time.
Yeah.
Confrontation is, oh my god. Confrontation is there's not enough words to describe how amazing Confrontation is, or how amazing his performance is in Confrontation. Like they genuinely seem like two different people.
Yeah, that I would absolutely agree with in retrospect, thinking back to it. So, all right, if there's nothing else, then I think we're going to draw this to a close. As always, Shay, this has been a real treat. You know, it's not normally something I get to talk about, but I think these three in particular, especially the first two, opened up a level of discussion that I really enjoy having, and I appreciate you having it with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I love coming on here and talking musical movies with you.
Cool. Well, you will be back sooner than later. As a matter of fact, when are you back? Maybe not May. Hang on. Ugh, I'll just look it up. You will be back suddenly, Seymour.
He's right there beside me.
In 2 months, this being May 1st, July 10th. And we'll be doing some more musicals again. We'll be doing Odessa, which actually just was featured on Hulu.
Yeah.
The End, which I had to look up. It came out at the end of the end. The End came out at the end of 2024. It's a post-apocalyptic musical. That's kind of the theme going here. And another post-apocalyptic movie, Dear Evan Hansen. Just kidding. Maybe not, but. I decided you had said that you'd wanted to do it, and I figured if I don't throw it into something soon, I'm going to forget. So we're going to do Odessa, which came out this year, 2025, on Hulu. The End at the end of 2024, and Dear Evan Hansen. And unless you jump on something before then, you'll be back in August for the Toxic Avenger movies. Then we'll be doing a Terry Gilliam, I believe, focus, Time Bandits, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And then we're back to musicals again in October. And I just put this together. I didn't even ask you about it. I just said, this is what we're doing. So we're going to do Les Miserables from 2012, The Phantom of the Opera from 2004, and Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Seville. And then after that, our Halloween show this year is a Tim Burton focus, which everyone bugged me about last year, and I booked it for this year because I aim to please. We'll be looking at Edward Scissorhands, Mars Attacks, and Dark Shadows. I switched that because I moved Sweeney Todd to the musicals one. So that's what we got a loaded year ahead of us of musicals and nonsense. Aren't you excited?
Yeah. I am very excited.
Fantastic. All right. With that being said, tomorrow is another triple feature. This one's rescheduled from about a year ago several times, and finally I nailed Pat down to a cross, and we're finally talking about the fun High School in Trouble movies, The Principal, The Substitute, and 187. This past Sunday, myself and Jesse Starcher looked at some recent action movies that are on streaming. Cleaner with Daisy Ridley, Al Alarum with Sylvester Stallone and Scott Eastwood, and G20 with Viola Davis playing Michelle Obama. Not really. And then myself and Robert had a lovely conversation, believe it or not, about the Electric State. Next week, when I'm finally done doing all these podcasts, I'll do some more. Monday night, we are doing Thunderbolts, the latest Marvel nonsense. Wednesday night, The Late Late Show, me and Harry Broadhurst, the Indie-siders is what we call ourselves. We'll be looking at Action 7. He picked this indie show, not me. And then finally, because Bailey, you, Y-O-U, capital Y-O-U, has come to its glorious conclusion, and Jason and I are going to tell you all about it. And that's all for me. Thanks. I'm driving. Shay, tell us where you pissed from.
All right. I am Shay Tate from Tate FX. If you want it to bark, bite, or spit blood, I am the person to call. That is Tate FX on Facebook.
All right. Once again, Shay, always a pleasure. For Shay Tate, I'm Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.